Hey guys, tonight we wander back to a world that smells of smoke, manure, and damp straw. A world where your feet are always cold, and your only alarm clock is the rooster who doesn't understand weekends. You're about to wake up as a medieval peasant, which sounds quaint until you realize your breakfast might involve licking last night's bowl clean. You probably won't survive this, at least not without catching a cough that rhymes with doom. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake to the crackle of a dying fire and the unmistakable scent of damp wool. Smoke curls lazily through the rafters, caught between the beams and the thatch, before escaping through a gap where daylight slices in. The floor beneath you is hard, packed earth, the kind that turns slick when it rains and dusty when it doesn't. A pig snuffles in the corner. Your roommate, your heater, and, if winter gets bad enough, your future dinner. Your breath fogs in the chill morning air. Somewhere outside, a cow bellows, impatient to be milked. You roll from your straw mattress, bits of it clinging to your clothes and hair, and stretch beneath a low, crooked ceiling. The smoke stings your eyes. You cough, wave it away, and glance around your home. A single room hut that's more patchwork than architecture. The walls are wattle and daub, a fancy way of saying sticks and mud pretending to be stone. Still, it's yours. Well, sort of. The truth is, everything here, your hut, your tools, even the little garden behind the house, technically belongs to the Lord. You're just borrowing it for a lifetime in exchange for work, taxes, and loyalty. Mostly work, though. The medieval world doesn't do rent, free living. You shuffle toward the door, a plank of wood that leans more than it hangs. Outside, dawn paints the village in silver mist. Chickens peck the mud. Children chase each other barefoot, their laughter carrying through the damp air. Beyond them stretch endless fields, already dotted with figures moving slowly through the fog. Your neighbors, already working before the sun even clears the hills. Life here runs on rhythm, not choice. The cock crows, you rise. The sun climbs, you labor. The bell tolls, you pray. And by nightfall, you collapse back into the same straw that pokes through your tunic. As you step outside, the mud sucks at your bare feet. You mutter a curse under your breath. Softly, because the priest says words like that tempt demons. You grab a wooden bucket and head toward the communal well. The water's cold and metallic, but it wakes you up faster than any cup of coffee ever could. While you wait your turn, gossip flows faster than the bucket rope. Old Marjorie complains about a fox stealing her chickens again. A boy boasts that he saw the Lord's knights ride past yesterday, their armor flashing like stars. You nod, pretending to care, because gossip is the medieval version of social media. You can't escape it, and sometimes it's the only news you'll ever get. You return home, pour water into a cracked clay pot, and stir the morning gruel. It's a thin porridge of oats and water, sometimes flavored with salt, sometimes not. On lucky days, you might scrape in a shred of bacon fat, but luck is rare currency here. As you eat, the rooster hops inside, pecking near your feet. You toss it a grain, thinking about how absurd it is that this bird eats better than you some days. Outside, the air thickens with the scent of dung and smoke from dozens of hearths. It's not pleasant, but it's homey in its own strange way, like the smell of your own sweat after a long day. Familiar, comforting, horrible, all at once. You glance toward the manor on the hill. Even from this distance, its silhouette looms. Stone walls, banners, the faint glint of metal where guards pace. You'll never set foot in there, unless you're carrying firewood, paying taxes, or getting scolded. Yet, somehow, that castle defines your life as much as your own heartbeat. Still, you make the best of it. You've got neighbors who share what little they have, a patch of soil that grudgingly grows cabbages, and a faith that promises things will be better after death, which, conveniently, could happen any day now. You tie on your wool cap, grab your wooden hoe, and head toward the fields. Dew clings to the grass, soaking your hem as you walk. Every step feels both purposeful and hopeless, because no matter how hard you work, the Lord gets the first cut. You just get whatever's left behind. By mid-morning, the sun burns through the mist. Your back already aches from bending, weeding, lifting. You straighten for a moment, stretch, and squint toward the horizon. Smoke rises from another village. Too much smoke. You wonder if it's a fire or a festival. You hope for the latter. Historians still argue whether peasants like you saw your world as miserable or just normal. To you, it's both. You don't dream of palaces, you dream of a dry bed and enough bread to fill your belly. During a short break, you kneel to drink from a stream, ignoring the murky bits floating in it. That's fine. If it doesn't crunch, it's clean enough. You wipe your mouth with your sleeve, chuckling as a frog leaps away. Better swimmer than I'll ever be, you mutter. Joke one for the day, even if the only one laughing is the frog. Back at your hut that evening, you sit by the fire, watching sparks drift up through the smoke hole. Your children, thin, wild-haired, eternally muddy, curl beside you. One hums a tune learned from the church choir. The melody is haunting, a reminder that beauty still exists between blisters and taxes. Your wife, tired but smiling, patches a tunic near the firelight. The needle glints as she works. She tells you about a peddler passing through tomorrow, selling pins and ribbons, and maybe spices. You know you can't afford any of it, but just hearing about cinnamon feels like a luxury. As night settles, the village dims. The only light left comes from fires flickering behind cracked shutters. You lie down again on the straw, the pig snoring softly in its corner. Outside, an owl hoots. Inside the fire sighs. You think about tomorrow. About the Lord's taxes, the rain, the harvest that might fail again. But you also think about how the seasons turn, how the trees bloom, how sometimes, just sometimes, the bread tastes sweet even without honey. That's the thing about being a medieval peasant. Survival isn't a goal, it's a rhythm. You don't plan, you endure. Your eyelids grow heavy. The smoke stings less now, or maybe you've just grown used to it. Tomorrow will come, as it always does, and you'll rise again to the same fields, the same mud, the same hope that hasn't quite died. Because even in a world built to break you, somehow you keep standing. The rooster crows again, way too early, as if you hadn't just spent most of the night half awake, listening to the wind whistle through the cracks in your hut. Your stomach rumbles before your feet even hit the dirt floor. Hunger is your first companion of the day. The fire's gone out, and the air inside is damp, tasting faintly of ash and cabbage. You kneel, coax a few stubborn embers back to life, and drop a handful of twigs into the pit. The smoke curls upward, filling your one-room world. You blink through it and reach for the pot hanging on its blackened iron hook. Inside is yesterday's gruel, thicker now, almost solid, a greyish blob that jiggles when you poke it. Perfect. Breakfast. You splash in a bit of water from the wooden bucket, stir it with a stick, and set it near the fire. The smell that rises isn't exactly pleasant. It's like wet oats meeting despair. But it's warm, and warmth counts as a kind of blessing here. You glance toward the door, where sunlight seeps in through the cracks. Outside, the world is waking, goats bleating, a baby crying, the sound of a hammer striking metal in the smithy. Life begins again, just as hungry as you are. Your wife, half asleep, mutters something about saving the crusts for the children. You nod, even though you know there aren't many crusts left to save. She wraps herself in a wool shawl, rubbing her arms against the chill. Maybe the Lord's cook will throw out bones today, she whispers hopefully. That's how low the bar is. You measure good fortune in discarded bones. When the gruel finally bubbles, you dip in a wooden spoon and take a cautious taste. It's bland, but you pretend it's delicious, mostly because the children are watching you for cues. You add a pinch of salt, the precious bit left from last autumn's market. For a moment, that tiny spark of flavor almost makes the world feel civilized. Medieval food is, by modern standards, a test of endurance. The average peasant's diet is 80% bread, or something pretending to be bread. Barley loaves, oat cakes, rye biscuits so dense, you could use them as self-defense. Wheat is for nobles. You make do with whatever the weather allows, and the weather rarely asks your opinion first. Still, you have your tricks. You stretch milk with water, stew turnips until they surrender to mush, and brew oil so weak it's practically flavored water. Yet it's safer to drink than the well. Even the poorest family makes oil, not because they're merry, but because boiling kills what's invisible and deadly. Outside, your neighbor, old Thomas, waves his wooden spoon in greeting. He's missing 2 teeth, and probably more cartilage than he admits. But he still works harder than anyone half his age.
Good oats today,
he shouts. You both laugh, because that's the medieval version of sarcasm. Later, you join him in the fields to dig parsnips that resemble shrunken, mud-covered fingers. As you work, the two of you talk about food. The way soldiers brag about weapons. He tells you his wife once made pottage with dried peas and nettles. You tell him you once roasted a hedgehog's, and yes, historians confirm that was sometimes real cuisine. Best meat I've ever had, you claim, straight-faced. He smirks. Until it rolled away. That's joke 1 for the day. Keeps the H in your back from feeling quite so heavy. When noon comes, you sit in the shade of a low wall, sharing what's left of your morning bread. It's coarse, flecked with grit from the millstone, and your teeth grind on it like gravel. You chew slowly, watching the sky. Clouds gather, but no rain yet. Maybe that's mercy. Maybe it's a warning. Food, or the lack of it, isn't just hunger here. It's power. The Lord's granaries could feed 12 villages, yet you and your neighbors rely on his charity when the harvest fails. Every loaf that passes through your hands feels borrowed. And sometimes, it literally is. You owe it back in labor. Still, peasants have ingenuity. You dry herbs, smoke fish over the hearth, ferment cabbage into sour pickles that last through winter. You even find sweetness, where you cans honey stolen from hives in the forest, berries foraged from hedgerows, and the occasional miracle of a fat hare trapped in a snare. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants were malnourished by default or just incredibly adaptive eaters. But looking at your dinner, a bowl of onion stew thickened with breadcrumbs, it's hard to imagine anyone calling this a balanced diet. By evening, you return home carrying a bundle of wilted greens and 2 eggs. Your wife looks at them as though they're jewels. The children bounce on their straw mats, eager for something new. Together, you make a stew, a pinch of salt, a handful of greens. 1 egg cracked for luck, the other carefully saved for morning. The smell fills the hut. Earthy, smoky, faintly sulphurous, and it feels, just for a heartbeat, like feasting. As the meal simmers, your wife hums an old lullaby about Saint Brigid blessing the butter churn. You chuckle. Would need a cow first. She winks. Dreams are free. When you finally eat, the stew tastes better than it should. Maybe it's hunger. Maybe it's the company. You joke that if a noble ever tried your cooking, they'd faint from humility. Your son laughs so hard he spills his bowl. Outside, the sun sets behind the thatched roofs. The air cools, and the smell of wood smoke thickens. You lean against the doorframe, belly not quite full, but satisfied enough. Across the village, laughter and faint singing drift through the dusk. Someone's brewing ale. Someone else is arguing. Life, loud and ordinary, keeps going. Tomorrow will bring the same: more bread, more sweat, more praying for rain or sun or both. But tonight, you allow yourself a rare indulgence, a quiet moment of gratitude. You survived another day without starving. In your world, that's victory. You glance up at the stars. They're sharp and bright, untouched by city smoke. Maybe one of them, you think, is looking back, whispering, keep chewing, keep breathing, keep going. And you do. Because even when the world offers you nothing but barley and hope, you find a way to make it taste like survival. The dawn mist clings to the fields, like a ghost that refuses to leave. And you're already walking through it, with a wooden hoe slung across your shoulder. The mud squelches underfoot. The same path you've walked since childhood. Each footprint overlapping another, like history itself refusing to forget you. The air smells of dew, manure, and the faint sweetness of crushed grass. Today, you'll plough, sow, and sweat from sunrise to sunset. But not for yourself. Not really. The fields belong to the Lord, as does the grain you'll harvest. The wool on your sheep, and even the timber your roof is made from. You own your hunger, and not much else. Your breath fogs in the cool air. Around you, men and women trudge toward their assigned plots, tools clattering, heads bowed. The sound of distant church bells drifts over the hills. That's your clock, your calendar, your boss, and your conscience, all rolled into one. The manor looms above the village like a stone judgment, its towers catching the pale sun. You squint up at it, muttering under your breath. Hope his lordship's bed feels as lumpy as mine. You grin, even though no one's listening. Joke one for the day. Sarcasm is your only rebellion that doesn't get taxed. You reach your strip of the Lord's land, marked by nothing more than a line of stones. It looks endless, and yet you'll finish it by nightfall, because you have to. The steward, the Lord's tight, lipped accountant of souls, keeps track of every unploughed furrow. You plant your feet in the damp soil, lift your hoe and begin. Swing, strike, breathe. Swing, strike, breathe. The rhythm becomes hypnotic, like a prayer in motion. You think about your family, your aching back, your empty stomach, and then nothing at all. just the sound of the earth splitting open. By mid-morning, your hands are raw, your tunic soaked with sweat. You pause to drink from a gourd of ale. It's warm, flat, and tastes faintly of hay, but it's safer than water, and better than nothing. Historians still argue whether peasants saw themselves as slaves or free men. You don't need a historian to tell you the truth. You feel it in your bones. You're bound to the land, and the land is bound to the Lord. But within that chain, there's a strange sort of freedom too. The freedom to endure, to outlast, to laugh at your own misery. A shadow falls over you. It's the steward, mounted on a small horse that looks as tired as you feel. His cloak is trimmed with fur, his boots spotless. He doesn't say hello, he never does. Just, you're behind your share. You nod without looking up. The soil's heavy today. He sniffs, unimpressed. The Lord expects the tithe before sunset. Of course he does. The Lord always expects. But when the steward finally rides off, you stick your tongue out at his back. A childish gesture that makes you laugh out loud. By noon, the sun is high and merciless. You kneel to eat your midday meal. A hunk of bread, a wedge of cheese, and a handful of wild onions. You eat slowly, pretending it's a feast. Around you, others do the same, murmuring prayers, wiping sweat from their brows. Old Agnes, bent like a question mark, sits beside you and mutters, "When I die, I'm coming back as the Lord's horse." They eat better. You grin. Aye. But then you'd still have to listen to him. Laughter ripples through the workers. A brief rebellion. A shared moment of warmth stronger than the sun. The afternoon drags on. The earth turns from mud to dust. The air thick with the smell of sweat and soil. Your arms ache, your palms sting, but you keep going. Because if you stop, you fall behind. And if you fall behind, you lose what little safety your family has. As the sun dips, you haul your tools back toward the village. Your tunic sticks to your skin, your back feels like a stretched bowstring, and your stomach growls like an angry dog. But then, from the manor, you hear faint music, a lute, maybe, or a harp. The Lord's household must be feasting. You imagine the scene: long tables, roasted meat dripping fat, golden cups clinking. You picture the Lord himself, his fingers greasy, his laughter booming. You picture all that food. Bread white as snow, pies stuffed with venison, fruits from faraway lands, and you realize that the grain you sowed might end up on his table. The thought burns, but not with anger, more like a dull, resigned ache. Still, you whisper, "May his belly ache tonight," and smile to yourself. At home, your wife greets you with tired eyes and a pot of stew. It's mostly cabbage and water, but she's added a single sliver of pork fat for flavor. You sit, eat, and let the warmth spread through your body. The children chatter about a wandering juggler who passed through earlier, trading tricks for bread. After dinner, you mend your tools by the firelight. The metal's dull, the wood splintered, but it'll hold another day. The fire crackles, casting orange light across your wife's face. She hums softly, the same melody she always does when she's half asleep. Outside, the night deepens. Crickets chirp, and the manor bell tolls once, echoing over the fields. You think about tomorrow. More ploughing, more sweat, more coins to the Lord, but also, perhaps, another joke shared at the well. Another laugh. And that's how you survive it. One back, breaking day at a time, balanced between exhaustion and endurance. You stretch out on your straw bed, listening to the soft breathing of your family. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks and a horse snorts. You close your eyes, your muscles buzzing with fatigue. You may not own the land, the walls, or the sky, but you own this moment of peace. For now, that's enough. Because even under the weight of the Lord's thumb, you still manage to stand tall when the morning comes. And that, in its quiet way, is rebellion. The first light of morning filters through the cracks in your shutter, painting the air in faint stripes of gold and dust. Your joints ache before you even move. Another day begins, same as the last, but today's rhythm feels different. It's Sunday. Or at least, it might be. You never really keep track of days. The church bells tell you when to rest, and that's good enough. You sit up, stretch, and for once, you don't reach for your hoe or your bucket. Instead, you reach for your one decent tunic, the one without visible patches, the one that smells faintly of smoke and lavender. The missus insists you wear it to mass. The air outside is softer, filled with a rare sense of stillness. No clatter of tools, no curses from the fields. Just the murmur of villagers washing, braiding hair, tying shawls. Everyone looks slightly less wary today, if not because of faith, then because it's the only time of the week you're allowed to pause. The church stands at the village edge, squat and grey, built from the same stones that have scraped your plough for years. Its bell tower leans slightly, like it's tired of centuries of ringing. Still, when that bell tolls, it commands attention. You walk with your family along the muddy path, children tugging at your sleeves, trying to outrun each other. Smoke rises from hearths left burning low, and the air carries the faint tang of burning peat. Someone's goat bleats angrily, apparently not invited to church. Inside, the cool air smells of beeswax and stone. Sunlight spills through narrow windows, fractured into ribbons of red and blue by the stained glass. Tiny saints, watching from above, with the same expression your Lord wears when inspecting taxes. You kneel, your knees already protesting against the hard floor. Around you, the villagers murmur prayers in a jumble of voices, half Latin, half guesswork. You've said the same words since childhood, though you still don't know what most of them mean. That's fine. Meaning isn't the point here. Obedience is. The priest climbs the pulpit, his robes gleaming. He speaks of sin, of famine as divine punishment, of hard work as holy duty. You nod along, the same way you nod at the steward, though one takes your crops and the other your confession. Still, there's comfort here. The flicker of candles, the low hum of hymns, the sense that for 1 hour, everyone, peasant and lord alike, is kneeling before the same God. You glance around. Old Agnes is asleep against her husband's shoulder. The miller's boy is picking at a scab. Your wife's lips move in silent prayer. Her hands clasp so tight her knuckles whiten. You feel a pang of tenderness. She believes so fully, it almost makes you believe. When the priest raises the host, the light catches it just right, and the hush that falls feels sacred. You close your eyes. For a moment, you're not hungry, not poor, not tired. You're simply human, breathing in sync with 100 others who share the same small piece of earth. Then, the bell rings again, and reality returns. After Mass, the churchyard transforms into the medieval version of a town square. People swap gossip, news, and sometimes goods. Eggs for thread, milk for candles. It's a market of murmurs. Old Thomas settles up to you, grinning. Heard the priest say rich men can't fit through heaven's gate. Suppose that means the Lord's stuck outside? You laugh softly, only if the gatekeeper's got sense. Joke one of the day, whispered like a prayer. The priest passes by, nodding sternly. You both straighten, faces instantly solemn. He blesses your children, gives your wife a smile that lingers a bit too long, and moves on. You sigh. Gus saints have their temptations too. She swats your arm, half smiling. The rest of the day feels almost luxurious. You mend tools by the fire while your wife bakes a small loaf sweetened with honey. One of the few Sundays she can spare the precious syrup. The smell fills the hut, warm and rich, wrapping around you like a blanket. Outside, children chase chickens through the mud, laughter echoing. Someone plays a crude fiddle. The sound wobbles but joyful. Faith, here, isn't just religion, it's glue. It holds the village together when the harvest fails, when sickness strikes, when the Lord demands double rent. You believe in God because you have to. Because without that belief, there'd be nothing left to explain the suffering. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants were truly devout or just dutifully terrified. Maybe it's both. You pray as much out of habit as hope. The line between fear and faith is thin as the thread in your wife's mending basket. As night falls, you sit outside your hut, watching the last glow fade from the sky. The fields glimmer faintly with fireflies, and the air hums with crickets. You can hear faint singing from the churchyard, young voices, maybe sneaking in a hymn before curfew. You tilt your head back, watching the stars. Somewhere beyond them, they say, lies heaven. A place where the harvest never fails, where bread is white, where no lord owns your sweat. You imagine it, just for a moment. The weight lifting from your shoulders, the silence of peace. Then your youngest tugs your sleeve, holding out a crust of honey bread. You can have the last bite. Da. You smile, break it in half, and hand it back. We share everything, remember. Because here, in the shadow of church bells and manor towers, sharing is survival. The night deepens. The fire burns low. You whisper a short prayer, not out of fear, but habit, half gratitude, half plea. And before you drift off, you think maybe that's what holiness really is. Not miracles or saints, but the stubborn act of hoping tomorrow will be kinder. You wake to the sound of rain, steady, relentless, and already finding its way through the roof. Each drop that falls on your face feels like the world reminding you who's in charge. The air inside the hut is cold and heavy. Smoke from the hearth struggles to rise, trapped by the wet air pressing down from above. Outside, the village has vanished beneath a sheet of mist. Water drips from the eaves, trickles down the paths, and turns the familiar earth to sludge. You step outside barefoot, the mud sucking greedily at your toes. A pig snorts near the door, delighted by the puddles. You? Not so much. The fields lie ahead, blurred in the grey rain. The soil you tilled, sowed, and prayed over is drowning. The tiny green shoots of barley bend under the weight of the storm, already half, swallowed by muck. You stare at them, helpless. Months of labour, washed away in a single night. Your wife joins you at the doorway, wrapping her shawl tight. Her expression says everything. You both know what this means. A bad harvest isn't just bad luck. It's a death sentence wearing a polite smile. Still, you mutter, could be worse. She raises an eyebrow. How? You shrug. Could be snow. Joke one for the day. And it falls flat. But you grin anyway, because humor's the only thing that doesn't rot in the rain. You trudge toward the fields, boots squelching, cloak plastered to your back. The water runs in thin rivers through the furrows, carrying bits of seed with it. You kneel, scoop some mud in your palm, and let it drip through your fingers. The earth smells sour, heavy, and wrong. Historians still argue whether medieval farmers understood drainage or just trusted luck. You lean toward the latter. You've heard tales of monks building clever ditches and water channels. But here, you've only got your back and your prayers. By mid-morning, you're soaked through, hair plastered against your forehead. The rain hasn't eased. It's deepened, grown angrier. You shout to your neighbor Thomas through the downpour. You're barely swimming yet. He laughs, shaking his head. Eh? But it doesn't know how. Together, you try to dig small trenches to lead the water away. The mud fights back, collapsing faster than you can scoop. Your hands ache, your knees sink deep, and the cold creeps into your bones like a thief. By noon, you give up. You can't fight the sky. You and Thomas trudge back to the village, silent now, except for the slosh of water with every step. The streets are rivers. Chickens huddle under carts. The thatched roofs sag like defeated shoulders. In the square, a group of villagers gathers around the priest, who stands beneath an umbrella of stretched hide, shouting prayers over the storm. The Lord tests us, he declares. Repent, and the rains will cease. You want to shout back. Maybe the Lord should test the Lord's fields first. But you bite your tongue. The last man who spoke like that spent a week in the stocks. Back home, you strip off your soaked tunic and hang it by the fire. Your wife wrings out her shawl, then ladles thin soup into a wooden bowl. The water hisses on the hot stones. The smell of turnips fills the air. You sit together dripping, eating silently as the wind howls outside. The children build castles out of mud near the hearth, laughing as if the world isn't falling apart. Their laughter is contagious. You can't help but smile. If we drown, at least we'll be clean, you say. Your wife rolls her eyes, but her lips twitch. Days pass. The rain doesn't stop. The air grows thick with mold and mildew. The floor of the hut stays damp, the straw bedding musty. The fields beyond turn into shallow lakes, reflecting a grey sky. You begin to dream of sunlight, of dry air, of bread that doesn't smell like damp wood. On the seventh day, the rain finally eases. The silence afterward feels eerie, unnatural, like the world is holding its breath. You step outside into a landscape reborn and ruined all at once. The air smells of rot and wet soil. The fields are flattened, the crops drowned. You walk through the muck, feeling each step sink deeper than the last. Here and there, you see neighbors poking at the earth, shaking their heads. The Lord's steward rides through, his horse splashing mud, shouting about keeping up the rent despite the losses. You watch him go, jaw clenched. Maybe he'll drown in gold. Thomas mutters beside you. You both chuckle, but the laughter fades quickly. That night, the village gathers in the church for prayers. The priest's voice echoes off the damp walls. We must humble ourselves before God's will, he says, for pride brings storms, and faith brings sunshine. Someone in the back whispers, faith doesn't dry barleyed. You bow your head to hide your smile. Afterward, you linger near the doorway, watching candles flicker against the rain-streaked glass. You think about what it means to live in a world where the weather decides who eats and who starves. You can't fight the clouds, can't reason with the wind, but somehow, you still plant again when the sky's clear. That's the quiet miracle of your life, Dee. You keep going, even when the earth itself seems tired of you. A few weeks later, the sun returns, bright and pitiless. The ground cracks where it once drowned. You replant what little seed remains, praying to every saint you know. Saint Swithin for rain, Saint Isidore for crops, even Saint Anthony, who's supposedly good at finding lost things like hope. The sprouts come late, weak but alive. You watch them every day, as though staring could make them grow faster. When the first green shoots break the soil, you laugh out loud, startling the chickens. You kneel, pressing your muddy hands together. "All right, God," you whisper, "you win this one." Then, with a sigh, you add, "But maybe next time, try a drizzle instead of a flood eye." The air feels heavy again, thick with heat, buzzing with flies, and carrying the faint metallic tang of something you can't quite name yet. The village smells wrong. Sweet and sour, like meat left too long in the sun. You tell yourself it's just the butcher's refuse, but deep down you know better. At first, it's whispers. Someone's cousin in the next shire took ill. Someone's aunt in the next village coughed up black stuff. Then the whispers turn into stories, and the stories turn into fear. You wake one morning to find that Thomas's wife hasn't stirred from her bed. You visit with a pot of broth, but the moment you enter the hut, the stench hits you. Sickly human, final. You back out quickly, murmuring a prayer. By noon, word spreads. Thomas himself has taken to bed. The plague has come. Hey, remember when you thought famine was the worst thing that could happen? Cute. You stand in the muddy street with the others, listening to the priest proclaim that it's God's punishment for sin. "Repent," he cries. "Confess your wrongs before you are judged." You look around. Every face wears the same tight-lipped terror. Mothers clutch their children. Old men stare into the distance. Even the Lord's steward, usually so smug, keeps his scarf wrapped tight across his mouth. Historians still argue whether people understood contagion or simply feared bad air. You don't know the difference, but you start burning herbs anyway. Rosemary, thyme, whatever you can find. The smoke fills the hut, making your eyes water and your lungs sting. Your wife ties a cloth soaked in vinegar over her face. "Can't hurt," she says. You nod, trying not to think about how absurd it looks. Like a medieval beekeeper trying to fight death itself with kitchen ingredients. By the third week, the death bell tolls every morning. Sometimes twice. Sometimes so often it feels like part of the weather. You dig graves until your hands blister, then dig more. The ground, softened by weeks of rain, collapses easily. Too easily. The priest mutters blessings faster than his tongue can keep up. No one dares touch the dead, except the poorest men, paid with bread that might itself be cursed. At night, you lie awake, counting the gaps in the silence, each one a missing neighbor. You wonder who will dig your grave if it's your turn next. There's a strange comfort in the routines. Chopping wood, boiling herbs, checking the children's foreheads. You cling to them, pretending life goes on. When your youngest asks, "Will the sickness find us?" you answer without thinking, "Not if we stay good." You hate how easily the lie rolls off your tongue. Then comes the day the plague reaches your doorstep. Your wife wakes shivering, her skin flushed and damp. You fetch water, herbs, anything. Then you see it, the dark swelling on her neck, angry and glistening. The world narrows to the sound of her breath. You sit beside her through the night, whispering prayers until your voice cracks. The children sleep in the corner, unaware. You hold her hand, burning hot, then cold. You keep holding it anyway, even after it's still. You bury her at dawn. No priest, no bell. Just you, a spade, and the distant core of crows circling above the fields. You don't cry. Not because you're strong, because you're empty. The days blur. The village thins. Houses stand open, half abandoned. Chickens wander free. You stop keeping count of the dead. There are too many. Then, one afternoon, a group of flagellants marches through the square. Bare-chested men, backs whipped raw, chanting Latin you don't understand. They claim pain drives the plague away. You watch them pass, thinking, if suffering were holy, we'd be saints by now. Still, you feel something stir. Hope, maybe, or defiance. You're not sure. Weeks later, the bell rings for the last time. Not because the plague is gone, but because there's no one left to ring it. The survivors move like ghosts through the wreckage, avoiding eye contact, whispering names like spells, and yet the earth doesn't stop turning. The sky doesn't fall. Slowly, impossibly, life begins again. You start with small things, fixing the fence, feeding the animals, mending your children's shoes. The rhythm of work becomes medicine. When the first new baby's cry echoes through the village, everyone stops to listen. It sounds like defiance, like proof that even death has limits. You trade stories by the fire about how people tried to survive. One man claims garlic kept his family safe. Another swears by onions hung in the doorway. You nod and pretend to believe them, because believing something, anything, is better than believing nothing. There's even laughter again, rough and uncertain. You catch yourself smiling at a stupid joke Thomas once made, then feel guilty for it. But you smile anyway. Months pass. Grass grows over the graves. Children play on the same ground where their mothers rest. Life, stubborn and small, keeps sprouting from ruin. One evening, as you watch the sunset paint the sky blood red, you whisper, "We're still here." It's not a prayer. It's a statement. A quiet one, but truer than any sermon you've ever heard. The wind shifts, carrying the smell of rain again. You look up, half laughing. You mutter, "Haven't you done enough?" But this time, it's gentle rain, a cleansing one. The air smells fresh. The world feels new. You close your eyes and let the drops fall on your face, washing away the dust, the fear, and maybe, just a little, the grief. The next morning, the world is quieter than you remember. Not peaceful, just hollow, like the silence after a scream. You wake before sunrise, the habit too deep to die, even after everything else has. Your breath hangs in the cold air. The hearth's gone out again. You strike the flint until the spark catches, because if you can make fire, you can make anything. Outside, the earth glistens with dew. The fields, the graves, the empty huts, all soaked in that soft silver light that makes everything look gentler than it really is. The air smells of wet hay and ash. Somewhere, a rooster crows, brave fool that he is. You step out, stretching the ache from your shoulders. The muscles never stopped hurting, but you've stopped noticing. There's too much to rebuild. Today it's the fence's first half, rotted, leaning, broken from neglect. You grip the wood, pull nails, and patch together what's left with twine and willpower. Each thud of the hammer feels like punctuation. I'm still here. I'm still here. I'm still here. Your eldest boy joins you, hauling a bundle of stakes that's almost bigger than he is. He's thinner now, older in the eyes. "Should we plant again?" he asks. You pause, looking at the barren field. The soil's dry, streaked with ash from burned weeds. A year ago it was rich and black, full of promise. Now, it looks tired. You know how that feels. Still, you nod. Aye, we plant. That simple phrase, 2 words, is the village's anthem now. You hear it everywhere at the well, by the hearth, in the murmured prayers at dusk. We plant. Because planting means tomorrow might exist. You and your son dig the first furrows together. The rhythm is familiar, almost soothing. The plough creaks, the earth sighs open, and for a moment you forget the funerals, the hunger, the endless bells. Historians still argue whether peasants truly felt hope or just habit. But as your fingers close around a handful of seed, you think maybe there's no difference. Habit is hope when everything else has fallen apart. By noon, the sun burns high, hot and golden. Sweat trickles down your neck, mixing with dust. The village hums again, quietly, cautiously. Someone mends a roof. Someone else sharpens a scythe. The sound of life returning is soft, but steady. Then the Lord's steward arrives. Because of course he does. He rides in on a tall horse, fine cloak draped over his shoulders, nose wrinkled as though the air itself offends him. Behind him, 2 guards follow, spears gleaming. By order of Lord Henley, he announces, rent will resume this fortnight. Those unable to pay in coin must repay in labor. You stare at him, mud on your hands, sweat on your brow. Labor? You ask? We've buried half the village. He shrugs. Then the other half will work twice as hard. The laughter that escapes your throat isn't pleasant. It's dry, sharp, and dangerous. Tell your lord, you say, that the dead don't plough. One of the guards grips his spear tighter. The steward just smirks. The Lord's mercy doesn't excuse duty. Then he turns his horse and rides off, leaving hoofprints deep as wounds in the wet ground. You watch him go. Thomas would have said something clever, something reckless, but Thomas isn't here anymore. That night, the villagers gather at the fire pit. Smoke drifts up into the clear night sky. Stars glitter like cold coins. Everyone sits close, because silence has grown too heavy to bear alone. Old Agnes, the midwife, speaks first. We could leave, she says. Find new land, far from lords, far from sickness. A younger man shakes his head. And go where? The next village looks just like this one, empty. You listen, stirring the fire with a stick. Sparks leap up, gold against the dark. We stay, you say quietly. This land buried our dead. It owes us something back. They nod. Not because they're sure, but because they need to be. The next days are a blur of rebuilding. You thatch roofs with bundles of straw. You carve new beams from trees in the forest. You dig ditches to drain the fields better this time. Because you've learned that lesson the hard way. Sometimes you catch yourself humming old songs, the kind your wife used to hum when the stew simmered. You stop mid-note, then start again, quieter. In the evenings, the air grows cold, and the smell of smoke clings to everything. You eat whatever the earth offers. Turnips, onions, bitter greens, but it tastes like survival, which is almost enough. Then, one evening, a stranger arrives. He's tall, wrapped in a patched cloak, with a pilgrim's shell hanging from his belt. His face is sunburned, his eyes sharp. He carries a staff and a pouch of dried herbs that smell faintly of mint and something foreign. I come from York, he says. The plague is fading. The markets open again. The king's men are rebuilding roads. You exchange glances with the others. York might as well be another planet. But hearing that the world beyond your valley still exists feels like sunlight, breaking through storm clouds. Do they still tax us? Someone asks. The stranger grins. Oh, worse than ever. Everyone groans and laughs. Real laughter, this time. He stays for the night, trading stories for bread. You learn that across England, whole manors have collapsed for lack of workers. Lords beg peasants to return, offering coin, food, even freedom. Freedom. The word rolls around your head like something forbidden. Could it be real? That night, as you lie by the fire, you think about it. For the first time in your life, the land needs you more than you need it. The balance has shifted. Quietly, invisibly. You smile to yourself. The world's changing, and you're still here to see it. In the morning, you wake to birdsong. The fields shimmer in early light. Rows of green shoots trembling in the breeze. For a moment, the air smells not of death or mud, but of promise. You stretch, crack your back, and murmur, "All right, let's see what you've got for us this time." Because hope isn't something you wait for anymore, it's something you build. One seed, one sunrise, one stubborn day at a time. By late summer, the village hums again. The fields, once drowned and desolate, shimmer gold under the sun. Barley sways like a sea of coins, and for the first time in years, the harvest looks promising. You stand at the edge of your plot, a sickle in one hand, sweat already beading on your brow, and feel something close to pride. Though you're careful not to say it out loud. Pride, in your experience, tends to summon trouble. The air buzzes with heat and the sound of crickets. Children chase one another between haystacks. The smell of cut grass, warm earth, and bread from someone's oven mixes in the breeze. Life, for once, feels almost normal. You glance toward the church where the priest, new one, since the last died during the plague, preaches gratitude instead of doom. The Lord spared us to rebuild, he says each Sunday. You suspect it's less divine mercy and more dumb luck, but you nod anyway. Faith has a rhythm that keeps people steady. You raise the sickle and begin to cut. The first swath of barley falls in a golden wave. Each handful feels like a small victory, like you're taking something back from the chaos that tried to swallow you whole. By noon, your tunic clings to your back with sweat. You pause, leaning on the handle of the tool, looking out over the field. The horizon shimmers. The air ripples with heat. You take a sip from your leather flask. It tastes faintly of metal and hope. Nearby, your son works in rhythm beside you, sleeves rolled up, hair matted with dust. "We'll have enough to trade this year," he says. "Maybe even salt from the market." You smile. "Salt, is it? Next you'll be wanting honey and candles." He grins. "Why not? We're rich in barley now." You laugh, a sound that feels strange but good in your throat. Historians still argue whether peasants were truly bound to misery or capable of joy. You'd tell them, joy happens when the belly's full and the roof doesn't leak. It doesn't take much more than that. By the time the sun sinks, the field stands half harvested. The sky burns orange, the air thick with the smell of straw. You look around and realize the village feels alive again. Voices calling, scythes swinging, laughter carrying over the fields. It's like the earth itself is breathing again. That night, you gather with the others near the communal barn. The harvest feast isn't much. A few loaves, roasted turnips, and a jug of ale. But it feels like a feast fit for kings. Someone strums a lute missing 2 strings. Someone else claps in time. You clap along, tapping your foot, the rhythm of life returning to your bones. Then, halfway through the laughter, Someone says it. The word that shifts everything again. Freedom. The stranger from York had planted the idea months ago, and it's taken root just like the crops. The lords are desperate for labor now. The survivors, peasants like you, can bargain for the first time. We could leave, says Will, the blacksmith. Find land that's ours. The steward can't stop us all. The others murmur. Some nod. Some shake their heads. You feel the thought crawl under your skin and stay there, warm and unsettling. Freedom. A life without rent, without bowing, without kneeling for permission to live. But freedom also means risk, hunger, unknown roads. You glance at your children, asleep against a haystack, and feel the old tug between duty and dream. You sip your ale and say, maybe after winter. The others nod. No one pushes further. But the word lingers in the air like smoke. Visible, dangerous, impossible to forget. Weeks pass. The harvest fills the barns. For once, there's grain to spare. You trade some for a small knife, a bolt of coarse linen, and yes, salt. Your son grins like he's conquered the world. One morning, you hear the distant sound of hooves. The steward again. He rides in, fatter now, but nervous. By order of Lord Henley, he says, taxes will rise this season. The manor must recover its losses. This time, no one bows. No one mutters, yes, my lord. You and the others stand in silence, scythes and spades resting in your hands. Tools, but sharp ones. The steward looks around, senses the shift, and clears his throat. Of course, mercy will be shown to the diligent. He adds quickly, then spurs his horse, and rides away faster than he came. That evening, you stand outside your hut, watching the last light fade behind the hills. The village is quiet again, but not fearful quiet. Thoughtful quiet. Your son joins you. What if we did go? He asks. Go where? Anywhere. Start again. Find land that's free. You look out at the darkening fields, the graves, the memories. You've buried too much here to walk away easily, but you also know this staying means kneeling forever. Maybe, you say softly, when the frost thaws. That night, you dream of open fields stretching to the horizon, of forests with no lord's banners hanging from the trees. In the dream, you walk barefoot through tall grass, and the air smells of rain and promise. When you wake, you can still feel it, the weight of the sickle in your hand, the sound of wind moving through free land. It's just a dream, but so was survival once, and look how that turned out. Winter creeps back like a slow thief. The fields, once golden, now sleep under frost. Smoke curls from the chimneys in thin, blue ribbons, and the air bites your skin until your fingers ache. You pull your cloak tighter and step outside into the white hush of morning. The village is quieter now, not because it's empty, but because cold makes people conserve their words. Each one feels like warmth leaving your mouth. Chickens huddle near the coops. Cows breathe steam into the air, and the pond at the edge of the village gleams, with a thin crust of ice. You trudge toward the barn, boots crunching on frozen ground. Inside, the air smells of straw, dust, and faint rot. The harvest's been good, but good never feels like enough. You run your hand along the sacks of grain, counting what remains. You'll stretch it with barley broth, with bread that's more air than flour. Still, compared to the starving winters before, this feels like luxury. Your son joins you, stamping his feet for warmth. Think the Lord will come for his tax in the snow? He asks. You snort. He'd ride through a blizzard for coin. But maybe the horse'll freeze before he finds us. He grins, teeth flashing white against the cold. You know he's growing into a man now. Taller, surer, with that dangerous spark in his eyes. The one that whispers we could have more. Back in the hut, the hearth crackles. Your daughter sews a patch onto your cloak, tongue poking from the corner of her mouth, in concentration. You watch her, heart tugging. So much of this world has tried to crush her, yet she hums as she works. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants had hope for their children, or just prayers. You'd argue hope and prayer were the same thing back then. You can't give them wealth, but you can give them stories, and that's almost as warm. You tell them about the time you saw the northern lights. Well, you didn't really, but the sky once glowed strange and green after a storm, and that's close enough. They listen wide-eyed, firelight dancing in their pupils. Does it mean angels are dancing? Your daughter asks. You smile. Maybe. Or maybe it's just the heavens stretching their fingers. They giggle, and the sound fills the hut like sunlight. The days shorten. The cold deepens. Sometimes, when the wind howls outside, it sounds like the ghosts of the plague year, calling through the cracks. You pull the blanket tighter, trying to muffle both the noise and the memories. One night, during a blizzard, the door creaks open and a traveler stumbles in. A woman wrapped in furs, cheeks raw with windburn. She smells of smoke and pine. "Forgive me," she says, voice trembling. "I've lost my way." You make space by the fire, offering her broth and bread. She eats quickly, then tells her story. She comes from the north, from a manor that's collapsed entirely. "The Lord's dead," she says softly. "No heirs. The peasants took the land. They share it now." You freeze mid-bite. "They share it." You repeat. She nods. "Each man works what he can. Each family keeps what they grow." The words burn in your chest like brandy. You can't stop picturing it. Fields without rent. Labor without fear. The dream from before returns sharper now, like a blade honed on the stone of possibility. The woman leaves after the storm clears, heading south. You watch her go, her figure shrinking against the white horizon. She leaves behind more than footprints. She leaves a question you can't stop turning over in your mind. Could that be us? By midwinter, the food stores run thin. You start mixing sawdust into the flour. Just enough to stretch it, not enough to taste. The children don't complain. They've learned silence can fill a belly when food can't. Then one morning, you find a dead sheep by the fence, its fleece matted, ribs gnawed clean. Wolves. You curse under your breath. The forest grown bolder since so many people died. The balance has shifted, nature's reclaiming what's hers. You and your son set traps, sharpen spears, and take turns keeping watch at night. The stars seem sharper in the cold, almost cruel. You huddle near the fire, listening for distant howls. When you finally catch sight of one, a grey shape darting at the edge of torchlight, you feel something stir that's older than fear. You lift your spear, muscles tense. The beast's eyes glow like coals, but it doesn't attack. It just stares, as if to say, "We're both hungry, you and I." You lower the spear. It melts back into the forest, silent as breath. In the morning, the snow sparkles untouched, except for paw prints leading into the trees. You follow them a while, just to see. They wind past frozen streams and frostbitten ferns. The forest feels ancient, watching you back. You stop at a clearing where sunlight filters through the branches, golden against the white. It's beautiful and cruel, all at once, like the world itself. You stand there a while, realizing this. The plague took people, the famine took crops, the lords took coin. But the land never stopped offering itself. It's wild, dangerous, indifferent, but alive. And maybe that's enough. You trudge home, cheeks burning with cold, heart strangely light. The hut's smoke rises straight and thin into the pale sky. Inside, your children laugh at some private joke, the sound cutting through the chill like music. You smile, step inside, and shut the door against the wind. Tomorrow, you'll mend the fence again. Tomorrow, you'll stretch the flour a little thinner. Tomorrow, you'll think once more about that northern manor, about peasants free and unbowed. Tomorrow, maybe, you'll decide. But tonight, you just sit by the fire, watching the flames dance, whispering to yourself, "We survived worse." And, somehow, that's comfort enough. Spring creeps in quietly, like a secret. One day the air still bites. The next you wake to bird song. A sound so sweet, you almost forget what silence felt like. The snow melts into rivulets that trickle through the lanes, carving muddy paths between the cottages. You breathe deeply. The scent of wet earth feels like resurrection. You step outside barefoot, the mud cool under your toes. Around you, life stirs again. The hens cluck louder. The fields twitch with the first hints of green, and children chase each other through the thaw, splashing through puddles with shrieks of joy. The world's been dead for so long that even this simple noise, laughter, warmth, feels like a miracle. But not everyone is smiling. You notice the Reeves horse tethered outside your neighbor's hut. He's inside, taking measure of grain owed to the Lord. Tax, always tax. Even after plague, even after famine, the coins must flow upward. You watch your neighbor, back bent, nodding as he hands over the sacks. His wife grips their baby tight, eyes hollow. Later, he tells you, "They raised the levy. Said the manor needs repairs." You stare at him, feeling something hot twist inside. The manor's still standing, isn't it? He shrugs, defeated. Aye, but with a mortar that keeps it standing. That night, you can't sleep. You lie staring at the rafters, listening to the mice scurry, thinking about that woman from the north, the one who spoke of peasants sharing land. Her words flicker in your skull like candlelight, bright and dangerous. The next day, you bring it up quietly to your closest friends. In the fields, with the plough biting the softening soil, you murmur between breaths, "What if we didn't owe them any more?" The men glance around, startled. One laughs nervously. Another spits. You'd get your head on a spike for that. Maybe, you say. But it'd be worth dying for, wouldn't it? The plough drags on, the oxen grunt, and for a moment no one answers. But later, when you pause for water, one man says softly, "Tell me more about that northern place." And just like that, the idea starts to spread, whisper to whisper, like embers catching dry grass. Days pass. The fields come alive with color again, and so does talk of freedom. You find yourself glancing toward the manor more often, its stone walls looking smaller than they once did. Maybe it's not that the manor's changed. Maybe it's that you have. Your son asks one evening, "Do you think we could live without a lord?" You look at him, really look. He's taller than you now, arms strong from work, eyes bright with questions you once buried. "Would still need rules," you say slowly. "Order. Someone to lead." He grins. "Maybe someone like you." You laugh, shaking your head. "No, lad. I've got enough trouble keeping the sheep in line." But later, when you're alone, The thought lingers. Maybe leadership isn't crowns and titles. Maybe it's just the courage to speak first when everyone else is silent. The church bell tolls in the distance, a low, mournful sound. You know what that means. Another death. The plague still whispers in corners of the world, refusing to vanish completely. You cross yourself out of habit, though your faith feels thinner these days. At Mass, the priest speaks of obedience. The Lord put nobles above us, as shepherds to guide his flock, he says. To rebel is to sin. You bite your tongue. But after the sermon, as you leave, you notice how others keep glancing at each other, hesitant, questioning. You're not alone anymore. One night, as the moon rises fat and yellow over the fields, you and a few others gather in the barn. It's not the first secret meeting. By now, it's almost a ritual. The smell of hay and sweat fills the air. Someone lights a tallow candle, its flicker throwing your faces into gold and shadow. A man named Osric speaks first. The reeve took my ox last week. Said it was payment for last winter's tithe. Another woman, hands rough and scarred, growls. They took my eldest to serve at the manor. He's 14. You nod. They're squeezing harder because they think we've forgotten how to bite back. Murmurs of agreement ripple through the room. Then Osric looks at you. You've got ideas. Tell us what you think. You swallow. The fire crackles. You realize they're waiting, really waiting, for your words. You say, the woman from the north spoke true. There's places where people share the land. No lords, no tithers, just work and fairness. If they can do it there, why not here? Silence. Then someone whispers, we'd need to fight. You nod. Or scare them enough they don't fight back. Osric leans forward. You'd lead us. You hesitate, heart pounding. No one leads. We all do. The candle flickers again, throwing strange shadows. Someone mutters a prayer. Another spits into the dirt. The air feels heavy, charged with something too large to name. By dawn, you disperse, pretending nothing happened. But the air in the village feels different now, tenser, alive. Even the birds seem to sing louder, as if sensing what's coming. The reeve arrives 2 days later with a list and 2 guards. Lord demands double levy this spring. He declares. You stare him down. Double. We barely survived winter. He sneers. Then starve. The Lord's needs come first. That's when Osric moves. It's quick. A blur of rage. The butt of his host strikes the reeve's knee. The man crumples, cursing. The guards reach for their swords, but half the field is already moving. Tools become weapons. Shouts rise like thunder. You grab your son's arm. Get back. But he doesn't. He steps forward, eyes blazing, and swings his pitchfork. The moment feels endless. A single breath stretched thin over chaos. Then it's done. The reeve lies still. One guard flees. The other drops his sword and runs. Silence falls, broken only by ragged breathing. No one speaks. You all stare at what you've done. The line crossed, the old world broken. Finally, you say quietly, there's no turning back now. Osric nods. Then let's not turn. And just like that, rebellion takes root. Not as a shout, but as a shared look between tired, hungry people who've realized they've got nothing left to lose. That night, the stars look sharper again, and the wind smells like rain. You sit outside the hut, listening to the quiet heartbeat of the world. Inside, your family sleeps safe and warm. For now, you whisper into the darkness, let them come. Because for the first time in your life, you're not afraid. Dawn rises red. A warning sky, they say, and you feel it deep in your bones before you even open your eyes. They're shouting in the lane again, boots crunching on frost, chickens scattering. By the time you stumble outside, half the village has gathered near the well. Someone's nailed a parchment to the post. The ink is smeared, the words stiff and official. All who defy their lords will are traitors to the crown. Beneath it, a wax seal. The king's crest. Your stomach twists. So, the news has spread. The Reeve's death didn't stay buried long. A man spits on the parchment. Another tears it down and crumples it in his fist. Around you, murmurs swell. Fear, anger, confusion. The air crackles like the moments before a storm. You realize the rebellion isn't coming. It's already here. You meet Osric's gaze across the crowd. His jaw is tight, his hands trembling. They'll send soldiers. He mutters. Then we'll be ready, you say. But you're not. Not really. That night, the leaders of nearby hamlets come riding through the mud. Cloaks pulled tight against the wind. You gather in the church, beneath the watchful gaze of stone saints who have probably seen worse. Someone brings all, another bread, and together you talk until the candles melt to puddles. There's no plan, just anger, desperation, hope that tastes like smoke. We want the same thing, says a young woman named Merrin. Fair rents. Our own land. Justice. Justice. Osric snorts. They don't trade in that anymore. You glance at the wooden crucifix above the altar. Then maybe it's time we take it. The room goes quiet. The priest shifts nervously, but says nothing. Even he's too tired to preach obedience anymore. You leave the church as dawn breaks again. Grey, heavy, cold. A mist drapes over the fields, softening everything. The first rays catch on your plough, abandoned in the mud. It looks small now, like a relic of a world you can't return to. The following week, word travels faster than carts. More villages rise up. You hear rumours, some true, most not, of peasants storming manors, burning tax records, marching on London itself. The air feels charged with possibility. You sharpen your scythe. Not for harvest, this time. Historians still argue whether that year's revolts were inevitable. A voice might say centuries later, but you don't have the luxury of hindsight. You've got hunger, rage, and the memory of every winter spent watching your children starve, while nobles feasted behind stone walls. And so you march. The day comes when your small band leaves the village for good. Dozens join along the road. Farmers, millers, even a few monks carrying wooden crosses like banners. You walk together beneath skies that threaten rain, chanting words you never thought you'd dare say aloud. No more lords. It feels dangerous, sacred. By the third day, the roads are thick with others. Men and women from miles away, faces weathered, eyes alight. They carry sticks, scythes, pitchforks, and the odd stolen sword. For the first time, you see that you are many. Merrin walks beside you. Think they'll listen to us? She asks. You glance at the horizon. They'll have to. When you finally reach the manor, it looks smaller than memory made it. The great hall looms with its wooden doors barred shut, guards pacing nervously on the walls. Behind you, hundreds of voices swell in unison. Shouts, chants, prayers. You step forward, mud caked on your boots, and call out, "We've come for what's ours." A guard laughs. Yours. You've got nothing but dirt. Then it's good we're already standing on it. Osric replies, raising his scythe. The gates tremble under the push of the crowd. For a heartbeat, you think they might hold. Then the hinges snap with a sound like thunder. Inside, chaos unfolds fast. The manor's tapestries tear, tables overturn, storerooms fling open to reveal sacks of grain and barrels of oil. People cry, laugh, pray, drink, collapse. It's freedom, messy and terrifying. You don't join the looting. You stand in the hall, staring at the Lord's chair, empty, carved from oak, polished by generations of power. You run your hand over its armrest. It feels colder than stone. Your son appears beside you. "We did it," he says. You shake your head. "We started it." That night, fires light the valley. Beacons or warnings, depending who's watching. You sit on the manor steps, the wind smelling of smoke and rain, and wonder what happens now. By morning, messengers ride out, lords rallying militias, knights returning from far lands. You knew it wouldn't last. But still, you hoped. The first soldiers arrive 3 days later. Iron and banners gleam against grey skies. The sound of hooves is distant thunder rolling closer. Your people scatter into the woods. Some surrender. Some fight. You choose to stand. The clash is short, brutal, and unfair. Metal meets wood, flesh meets steel. You see Osric fall. Marin disappears into the smoke. You're struck, stumble, and drop your scythe. The soldier raises his sword, but your son leaps forward, knocking him off balance. You both run. You don't stop until you reach the river, lungs burning, heart pounding. The water glitters in the fading light. You collapse onto the bank, gasping. Your son sits beside you, bruised and grinning. "They'll write songs about us," he says. You laugh, breathless. "Only if we live long enough to hear them." You spend the next weeks hiding, moving by night. The rebellion spreads, flares, then falters. One by one, the fires die out. Lords reclaim their halls. Heads decorate gates again. But something has changed. Even the survivors who crawl back to their villages carry a new look in their eyes. Defiant, awake. One evening, as you sit by a dying fire, you murmur, "They can hang the rebels, but they can't kill the idea." Your son nods slowly. Then, maybe, that's what living means. Afar away, the church bells toll again, marking another noble's feast day. The sound drifts faintly across the hills. This time, you don't bow your head. You stand, stretch, and look east, where dawn threatens the dark. Your hands are empty, your clothes torn, your future uncertain. But deep down, there's a calm strength that feels unbreakable. You survived the plague. You survived famine. You faced your Lord and didn't kneel. No matter what comes next, that's something no crown can take from you. And as the first light touches the fields, you whisper a promise to the land itself. We'll be free yet. When the smoke clears, and the last of the shouting fades into memory, what's left behind isn't victory or defeat. It's life, raw and stubborn, pushing its way through the cracks. The manor stands scarred, the fields trampled, the graves too many to count. But the sun still rises, and you still wake to the smell of earth and wood smoke. The rebellion didn't give you freedom. Not yet. But it gave you something harder to kill belief. In the weeks that follow, you move like someone walking out of a fever dream. The village limps back into rhythm. Animals need tending, roofs need mending, bread needs baking. You learn to live again, even if the taste of ash lingers in every meal. Your wife, who never left the village during the fighting, greets you with quiet tears. She doesn't ask what you saw. She doesn't need to. She just presses a warm loaf into your hands and says, "You're home." And that's when you realize, home isn't the hut or the field. or even the land. It's her. It's the people who kept the fire burning while the world tried to tear itself apart. Life goes on, in small and stubborn ways. The well gets repaired. A new roof goes up over the mill. Someone finds a puppy wandering the woods and brings it home, laughter returning to the village in cautious bursts. You and your wife lie awake some nights, listening to the frogs croak by the pond, her hand resting on your chest. "We nearly lost everything," she whispers. You nod, "But we didn't." She smiles in the dark. "That's what matters." And she's right. Because in this fragile piece, people start to find each other again. There's a wedding that spring, the first in 2 years. The bride wears a wreath of wildflowers. The groom looks like he hasn't slept in a week. You're there, of course. Everyone is. The priest's voice trembles as he blesses them. And when the crowd cheers, it's more than celebration. It's defiance. You clap, laugh, and even dance a little. For the first time in what feels like centuries, joy doesn't feel like a luxury. It feels like survival. That night, under lanterns, swinging from tree branches, you see your son sitting by the fire with a girl from the next village. She's got a quick smile and dirt under her nails. Your kind of people. You watch them laugh, share bread, lean close. It stirs something inside you, an H that's not quite sadness. Later, as you walk home under the moonlight, your wife nudges you. "Has growing up. Too fast," you murmur. "Not fast enough to leave before he's learned what you did." You chuckle softly. "And what did I learn?" She smiles. "That even when lords and plagues take everything, love still sneaks back in." You reach the door of your hut, the same one you left months ago to march on the manor. The wood creaks. The thatch leaks, but it's yours. Inside, the fire glows low, and for once, the silence feels kind. The seasons roll on. Summer bakes the earth, autumn gilds it, and winter sharpens it again. Through it all, people adapt. You see it in their faces. In the way they talk less of kings and more of harvests. In the way laughter returns slowly, shyly, like a wild animal creeping out after the storm. There's still hardship, of course. The taxes don't vanish. The lords rebuild. But something invisible has shifted. They look at you differently now. Not as beasts of burden, but as people who've tasted defiance. And you notice things you once overlooked. The smell of freshly cut hay. The way your wife hums as she kneads dough. The warmth of your son's hand on your shoulder when you're tired. These small things become sacred. One day, you're repairing the fence when the priest wanders over. He looks older, thinner, but there's a new gentleness in his eyes. "Strange times," he says. You nod. "We've seen worse." He chuckles. Historians still argue whether your rebellion changed anything. You smirk. Maybe they should ask the people who lived through it. He grins at that, then helps you lift the fence post. "Perhaps the change isn't in laws or crowns," he says quietly. "Perhaps it's here." He taps your chest. You pause, surprised. Didn't think priests believed in that kind of revolution. Maybe I do now. After he leaves, you sit for a while, watching the clouds drift by. There's peace in the air, a fragile one, sure, but peace nonetheless. And you realize that survival isn't just about food or shelter. It's about connection. The hands that reach for you when everything else falls apart. Months later, your son marries that girl. The whole village gathers again, laughter spilling like wine, songs rising into the night. You sit beside your wife, her hair streaked with grey now. And think of all the people who didn't make it this far. When the couple shares their first dance, she leans over and whispers, "Do you remember when we used to dance like that?" You smile. "We still can." She laughs. "Then prove it." And so you do. Slowly, awkwardly, barefoot in the dirt, you take her hand. The music is uneven, the rhythm clumsy. But none of that matters. The firelight flickers across her face, and for a heartbeat, you're young again. The years, the losses, the plagues, they all fade into the hum of the night. Later, when everyone's asleep, you sit outside alone. The moonlight silver paints the fields, and a cool breeze ruffles the grass. You close your eyes and breathe it in. The scent of earth, the whisper of crops ready to grow again. You think of all you've endured, the hunger, the fear, the injustice. And somehow, in the quiet, it feels worth it. Not because it was fair, but because you lived through it together. The frogs croak, an owl hoots. Somewhere, a baby cries, and a mother hushes it back to sleep. Life goes on unbothered by kings or crowns. You smile. The fight isn't over. It never really is. But for now, there's warmth, there's love, and there's tomorrow. And that, you decide, is enough. Morning mist curls low across the fields, clinging to your boots as you walk toward the stream. You've been nursing a cough for days now. Nothing deadly. Not like the old plague. But enough to make your chest rattle like a bucket of loose nails. Your wife scolds you for not resting. But rest doesn't keep the sheep in line or the roof from sagging. You stop at the stream, kneel, and splash the cold water on your face. The chill cuts through the fatigue, sharp and clean. You watch the ripples move downstream, carrying stray leaves like tiny boats. In the distance, you hear the low hum of village life, a child laughing, someone splitting wood. The faint clang of a blacksmith's hammer. Ordinary sounds, your favorite kind. Still, that cough lingers. You decide to visit old Aldith, the midwife who's somehow outlived 3 generations and claims it's because she never trusted priests or physicians. Her cottage smells of herbs, smoke, and cat fur. When she sees you at the door, she tuts before you even open your mouth. You've got the look of someone who's been breathing too much damp and too little garlic, she says. You chuckle, stepping inside. Garlic fixes everything, does it? It fixes more than prayer, I'll tell you that. She shuffles to her shelf, grabbing a handful of dried leaves and something that looks suspiciously like mud. No, sit down and breathe in this steam. And no complaining. You do as told. The smell is awful, like boiled weeds and socks left too close to the fire. But you admit it clears your head. As the potion bubbles, Aldith talks. People forget, you know. She says, stirring the pot. That before the lords and the doctors and all their Latin words, we knew how to heal ourselves. Nature gave us what we needed. Willow bark for pain, honey for wounds, mose for fever. The earth takes, but it gives too. You nod, half, listening, half, lost in the rhythm of her voice. The warmth, the crackle of the fire. It feels like a lullaby. When she finally sends you home with a small pouch of herbs, she says, "And if that doesn't work, rub your chest with goose fat and say the Lord's Prayer backward." You blink. Backward. She grins. Toothless. If it's good enough for the saints, it's good enough for you. On the way home, you can't help laughing. Goose fat and backward prayers. Half medicine, half magic. But then again, in your world, those two things aren't so far apart. That night, You sit by the fire, rubbing the mixture onto your chest, while your wife pretends not to find it hilarious. If you start clucking tomorrow, she says, "I'm sleeping outside." You grin through your coughing. Historians still argue whether goose fat actually works. She chuckles. Then we'll tell them it does, if you live. Days later, your cough eases. Maybe it was the herbs, maybe it was rest, maybe it was just luck. Either way, you make sure to thank Aldith next time you pass her cottage, and she nods proudly, like she's just cured the king himself. Medicine in your world is never certain. The village healer swears by foxglove tea, the priest insists on holy water, and the travelling doctors sell tonics that smell suspiciously like watered down ale. You've learned to take all of it with a pinch of skepticism and a large mug of beer. One afternoon, a stranger arrives in the village. A thin man in fine robes, carrying a wooden case of gleaming tools. He calls himself a physician, which sounds impressive until he starts charging for advice. He examines people's tongues, mutters words in Latin, and prescribes strange cures: crushed pearls for coughs, powdered deer antler for weakness, ground emerald for melancholy. You watch him work with both awe and suspicion. Can emeralds really cure sadness? You ask. He smiles thinly. Only the purest ones. You glance at your wife later and whisper, "Seems a waste of a good emerald." The villagers don't know what to make of him. Some swear he's a miracle worker. Others think he's a fraud. You've seen enough winters to suspect both might be true. When he leaves, the priest says the man's knowledge is dangerous. Only faith heals, he preaches. But you've noticed even the priest keeps a pouch of dried herbs under his robe. Still, people cling to what comfort they can find, be it prayer potion or pure superstition. You remember how, during the plague, villagers burned rosemary to chase off bad air. Even now, when someone falls ill, a few sprigs find their way into the hearth. You once asked the old priest why sickness chooses some and spares others. He sighed. God's will. Aldith, when asked the same, said, luck and clean water. You suspect both might be right. The seasons drift by in this rhythm of toil and tinctures. You grow older, slower, but also quieter in your heart. There's wisdom in the mix of mud and mystery. You've seen enough to know that survival isn't just about strength. It's about balance. The body, the earth, the mind. They all depend on one another. Sometimes you think of the world beyond your fields. The cities where plague first struck. The monasteries where scholars write down cures in cramped Latin. The sailors who bring back strange spices said to heal any wound. You wonder if, someday, your grandchildren will live in a world where medicine isn't half guesswork and half prayer. One evening, your granddaughter falls ill with a fever. You hold her small, hot hand as Aldith works her magic again. Steam, herbs, honey, whispered words. You pray quietly, not to saints or relics, but to the land itself. By morning, her fever breaks. You exhale, relief flooding through you like sunlight. Aldith just winks. Told you the goose fat works. You laugh until tears blur your eyes. Because in a world that's tried to crush you with famine, plague, and fear, laughter might be the oldest medicine of all. When you walk her home, the sky is a watercolor of pink and gold. You feel the ache in your bones, but also a lightness in your heart. Maybe the world's changing, slowly, stubbornly, like you. And as you look over your field one last time, before bed, you murmur to yourself, "We're still here. That's cure enough." The next morning dawns pale and cold, the kind of day where frost lingers like memory and breath curls in thin ghosts from your mouth. You wake to the sound of church bells, low and deliberate, like the heartbeat of the village. It's Sunday again, time to scrub your hands, brush off the mud, and pretend you're holier than you were yesterday. Your wife already has the bread baked and wrapped, her shawl tight around her shoulders. She hums softly as she works, the tune as old as the church itself. You pull on your cloak, heavy with age, and together you step out into the crisp air. The church sits on the hill, a squat stone thing, its spire stabbing the sky. The path to it is lined with muddy footprints and the smell of damp wool. Inside, candles flicker against cold walls. The priest, Father Oswin, stands before the altar in his finest robes, threadbare but patched with care. He begins his sermon with a familiar warning. Temptation walks among you like a wolf in sheep's skin. You've heard this one before. Every Sunday, in one form or another. Greed, lust, gossip, gluttony. The list is long and, somehow, always feels aimed at someone else. But this morning, there's a different tone in his voice. He's wound tighter, angrier. He slams his hand on the lectern. There are whispers of charms, of herbs, of unholy remedies in this village. Witches, I say! The devil hides in plain sight. Your stomach drops. You glance at Aldith, sitting quietly at the back, her gnarled hands folded in her lap. Her eyes, sharp as flint, don't move. The priest continues. We must purify our souls and our homes. Trust not the hands that heal without prayer! Trust not those who speak with the earth more than with God. By the time he's finished, half the congregation is murmuring. The other half is glaring at the floor. You know what this kind of talk leads to? Fear, suspicion, the turning of neighbors into enemies. After Mass, the crowd spills out into the cold. People whisper in tight clusters. He meant Aldith. One woman says, She cured my boy. Yes, but she mutters strange words. You hear another voice. Did you see her eyes? Cat eyes, I swear. You clench your jaw, sickened. Fear is a disease of its own. It spreads faster than plague. You walk home in silence. That night, the wind moans around the eaves, and you can't shake the feeling that something's about to break. 2 nights later, it does. A knock comes at your door just past midnight. Hard, urgent. You open it to find Aldith, her face pale, eyes wide. They're coming, she says. Oswin and his lot. Said they found charms buried near the churchyard. You don't ask questions. You pull her inside. Your wife, calm even now, starts packing bread and a small flask of oil. You'll need to leave before dawn, she says softly. Aldith looks around your small home. The firelight, the hanging herbs, the small wooden cross above the hearth. Didn't think it'd end like this, she murmurs. You squeeze her shoulder. It's not ending. Not yet. When dawn comes, you lead her through the forest paths few others remember, past the stream, into the thick of the old wood. The air smells of moss and pine. You stop near a fallen oak. This will do, she says. They won't find me here. You hand her your spare cloak. Stay low. Wait till it passes. She nods, tears glinting in her tired eyes. You're a good man. Don't let them turn you cruel. You watch her disappear into the trees, then head home, heart heavy. By midday, the priest and his men arrive. They search houses, dig up gardens, overturn cauldrons. You stand by your door, pretending confusion. You'll not find witches here. You tell them. Father Oswin glares. The devil hides where he's least suspected. He leaves with a warnings. If you harbor her, you'll burn with her. That night, you sit by the fire, staring into the flames. Your wife rests her head on your shoulder. "She'll be fine," she whispers. You nod, but you don't believe it. Days turn to weeks. No one sees Aldith again. The priest calls it divine justice. You call it loss. The village feels colder now, more fearful, more quiet. People start keeping their distance from one another. No one shares bread without a glance over their shoulder. You think often about how fragile truth is, how easily power twists fear into faith. In the name of purity, people destroy the very kindness that kept them alive. One evening, as you mend a fence near the woods, you find something wedged between the stones, a small pouch of herbs tied with twine. Inside is a sprig of rosemary and a small carving of a bird. You recognize her handiwork. She's alive. Then, somewhere, you smile faintly. You tuck the charm into your coat. The years pass like pages turning in the wind. The priest grows older, meaner. People stop listening as much. The world begins to shift again. New kings, new laws, new whispers of reason. You hear of scholars writing about medicine and science, about cause and effect rather than sin and punishment. The young ones talk of experiments and proof. You like the sound of that, though part of you knows it means the old ways, the Aldith ways, will be forgotten. Still, you keep her pouch near your bed. It smells faintly of sage and smoke, like memory itself. One morning, decades later, when your beard has gone white and your hands tremble, you walk to the edge of the woods. The world feels lighter somehow, less cruel. You kneel near that same fallen oak, half-rotted now, and whisper, "You were right, Aldith. The earth does give back." A bird lands on a branch above you. A robin, bright and unafraid. You smile, feeling warmth bloom in your chest. For the first time in years, you breathe without coughing. That night, you sleep soundly, as if the land itself has forgiven you. When they find you the next morning, you're sitting upright by the fire, a faint smile still on your face, the pouch of herbs clutched gently in your hand. Outside, spring has arrived. The frost has gone. The church bells toll again. Not for warning this time, but remembrance. And somewhere deep in the forest, a robin sings. The years stretch and fold like parchment, corners frayed by time and touch. You've outlasted famine, plague, priests and lords. The village that once trembled under the lash of hunger and fear now hums with quiet resilience. You are old. Older than most peasants ever dreamed of becoming. And each dawn feels like a borrowed coin pressed into your palm by a generous hand. Children now run where fields once lay fallow, chasing hens, and laughter through the thawed mud. You watch them from your stool by the door, your joints stiff, but your gaze steady. The new priest, gentler than Father Oswin, preaches hope rather than fire, and the air feels lighter for it. The manor, rebuilt after a storm and a generation's revolt, stands smaller somehow, less menacing. The new lord, a boy barely older than your grandson, actually walks among the people. He listens when they speak. You're not sure whether to trust that, but it feels different. Once, you had feared the sound of hoofbeats, the crack of a whip, the shadow of the plague cart. Now, you hear the blacksmith's hammer, the hum of spinning wheels, the creak of wagons carrying grain instead of corpses. You smile to yourself. Survival, you realize, isn't just about outlasting the hard years. It's about remembering how to live after they're gone. The harvest this year is kind. The barley rises tall, and the smell of baking bread lingers in the lanes. You still wake early, more out of habit than need, and walk the edges of the fields. Your hands, though gnarled and scarred, still know the weight of earth and seed. Sometimes you find yourself speaking to the soil, like you used to speak to Aldith. You thank it for its patience. You apologize for the years when you took too much. You tell it stories about the children who now dig, and sow with laughter instead of fear. Historians, those scholars who now scribble in candlelit rooms, still argue whether peasants ever truly rose above their stations. You laugh at that. You didn't rise above anything. You endured it. And that, you think, was victory enough. Your grandson, all knees and dirt, runs up with a grin. "Grandfather," he says, "tell me again about the sickness, the one that made the sky smell strange." You ruffle his hair. "I? You don't want to hear that. The world's got enough ghosts already." He frowns. "Then tell me about the woman in the woods." You chuckle. "No, that's a better story." And so you tell him about herbs and kindness, about fear and courage, about how people can be cruel when they're scared, and brave when they remember they're all the same under the mud. He listens wide-eyed, his small hands clutching yours. When he finally nods off, you carry him inside. The fire crackles low. The wind outside whispers against the shutters, soft as a lullaby. You settle into your chair, the warmth of the hearth licking at your feet. You look at the flicker of the flames and think of every soul you've met and lost. Your father who starved in a lean year. Your wife who laughed even when the roof leaked. Aldith who vanished but never really left. You feel them here, in the room, in the smoke, in the steady heartbeat of the earth outside. You close your eyes. And for a moment, you swear you hear the church bell again, faint and far away. Not a warning, not a call to prayer, but something softer, like a promise. The night has grown deep now, and you can feel the weight of every season you've walked through. Mud, frost, hunger, harvest, and all the little breaths in between. The sound of the village fades until there's only the gentle rhythm of crickets, the slow whisper of wind through straw roofs, and your own pulse settling to match it. You breathe in, tasting the faint scent of smoke and earth, the same scent that's carried through every century since. The peasants who came before you, and those who will come after, all breathe it in too. It's the smell of work, of waiting, of living quietly in a world that rarely noticed you, but always needed you. You think of everything you've endured. The plagues that swept like shadows, the lords who demanded and forgot, the winters that bit, the springs that forgave. Each hardship carved a piece of you away, but each dawn gave something back. And now, as the candle burns low, you feel that long ache finally soften. The world turns, always, but tonight it feels slower, gentler. You let your thoughts drift like embers in the air. The fields are quiet. The sky is vast. The story, for now, is at peace. Sleep, traveller. The plagues are gone. The famine's past. You've made it through. Sweet dreams.